Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Education Committee meeting scheduled for February the 9th, 2022. We welcome your participation and we will get started right away. And at this point, I will turn it over to our superintendent and his administrative team to get us started.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank our school leaders for being here this evening, as well as the attendees that we see. I noticed that we need to move over Mr. Matthew Lamons, please, from attendees. That would be great if we could do that. And I'm going to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Brown, to take us through the presentation tonight.
Good evening, everyone. We're going to go ahead and begin. Our agenda is very simple this evening. We're going to go over some academic data and then we'll go right into graduation requirements. So our presentation tonight will focus on Focus Forward 2025 and our priority goal 1, academic excellence. Our overarching goal 3 says a 30% point increase in the number of students who are proficient on a PSSA and our Keystone exams by March 2025. So as you recall, in August, we began the school year with our driven by data methodology by including an intentional common planning time to our school day. And each school began this process to analyze teachers' practices and student outcomes. In the fall, our students began to use began to use universal screeners and diagnostic assessments in mathematics, literacy, and science. Tonight, Ed Dunn, our supervisor of mathematics, will share a brief overview of our fall data and our winter data for the William Penn School District. Mr. Dunn.
Good evening, everybody. As Ms. Brown shared, we used our assessment data to drive decision-making to support student success. And you can go ahead and click the first bullet. There you go. And so this is, we want to make really good decisions about what we do to support students. And in order to do that, we use assessment data to understand where they are. There are a couple different types of assessments, but the ones we'll be focusing on today are what we call long cycle assessments. And they're primarily used to determine student levels and appropriate tiers of support. So what are the interventions that we need to put into place to support specific sets of students and around what areas of content? Currently, we are administering screeners and diagnostics around 3 key areas. That's mathematics and literacy. So from K to 8 for math and literacy, as well as in the high school level for the tested areas, the same as in science. We currently administer the CDT for our Keystone biology students. And as Ms. Brown mentioned previously, we are in our second cycle of this. So our first diagnostic happened in the fall, right at the beginning of the school year. And we have just completed our second cycle, which is our winter diagnostic window. We still have one more diagnostic window where we're administer essentially school or district-led assessments, which is currently scheduled for March. And then the end of year diagnostics, depending on the grade level, will either be like a PSSA at Keystone, which is state administered, or for like our K-2 students, they'll be taking our district administered diagnostics and assessments. We can move forward. So first, we'll take a look at our math screener and diagnostic assessment. which I'll be referring to as the MSDA. And what you see here are percentages of student level by grade. And so what you can see in green are the students that, based on the assessment, are currently at a meet or exceed for the grade level. And what's exciting about this data is that the goal for by the end of the school year is for students to be at meets or exceeds. So the fact that we have some of these populations that have already reached that designation is encouraging. There's a note at the bottom that it talks about that 34% of students either met or exceeding grade level benchmark as a district overall, well, for elementary. So if we average all these together, it's about 34%. And that represents a 27-point increase in comparison to the fall MSDA, which was administered in September. We could go to the next slide. This breaks down that comparison data to show where some of our highest areas of growth from fall to winter. So as you can see, particularly in our kindergarten, which is specifically outlined in our Focus 425, we've seen the most significant growth from our first assessment to our second assessment. And in general, we have seen significant growth from K to 3. We are not surprised with some of the older grades so far, because we do know that they're coming off of a pandemic, virtual school year, and that content is a little more rigorous. So we will continue to support and make plans and interventions to support those students. All right, we can move forward. All right, now on the reading and literacy side of the house, we administer what's called the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills. I know that's a mouthful. We call it DIBELS. All right, and so DIBELS works very much the same way, where it uses a variety of different probes to determine students' ability to read and to identify words and things associated with literacy skills. And similarly, this graph is structured that the green students are at or above benchmark. The students that are in yellow are below, and the students in red are well below. So when we look at an overall score, 41% of students either met or were exceeding the grade level benchmark, and that represents a 4-point increase in comparison to fall DIBELS. And we'll explain why that DIBELS metric looks a little bit different than our MSDA math metric on the next slide. All right, so as you can see, there are some scores that went up and some scores that are either flat or slightly decreased. One of the things that you need to understand about DIBELS is it's structured differently than the MSDA. So with our math diagnostic, students are assessed the exact same way in the fall as they are in the winter, whereas DIBELS, as the year progresses, additional skills and probes are added. So essentially the test gets more difficult as the year goes along. So we would like to see the maintenance and growth, but we won't see the same type of growth as the MSDA because it's the same test 3 times. So just to give some context and so that you understand why those two numbers may look a little bit different. All right, we can keep moving forward. So for our secondary, we'll talk about ELA first. For our secondary grades, our middle school takes the rapid reading assessment. And what we saw was that for our 7th grade students, particularly around the area of word recognition, they were increased. However, out of the 7 out of the 8 other probes, they were either flat or decreased in terms of student scores. And so that's definitely an area that we're going to continue to support. Similarly, our high school students that are in 10th grade, typically when they are taking their literature course, saw a score decrease from a scale score decrease of 874 to 863 from fall to winter. And when we look at that on a per student basis, we also see that less students actually scored in the advanced and proficient categories when compared to the fall window. So 2 areas that we can continue to support students and develop interventions around improving these outcomes. All right, next slide. All right, for our middle school, similarly to our K to 8, or K to 6, excuse me, all of our K to 8 takes the math screener and diagnostic. So we saw 20% of students after the winter assessment who scored in the met or exceeding, which represented a 13-point increase in comparison to fall MSDA. So we're moving in the right direction, and we'll continue to support that so that those gains are more significant by the spring. Compared to our high school, we saw a decrease of scale score from 881 to 864 from fall to winter. However, when you compare that to the student categories, more students were scoring in advanced and proficient. So we're really going to dive into that data to identify like what are the specific skills and areas of standards that students may be struggling on that we can support. And just to give a context about both of the CDTs, as we call them, or classroom diagnostic tools, they are content tests. So based on what students may be currently covering in class, obviously the students will perform better on more recent content. So some of that will go into driving, like what are some of the areas that we need to review and remediate for to make sure that students are maintaining their levels of mastery. All right, we can continue to move forward. All right, so based on that, what do we do next? Like, what is our structure for, unpacking this data and utilizing it to improve student outcomes? So the first thing that we do is we meet as a district level team to, essentially complete a needs assessment. We look at all the data from K to 12 that we've collected and say, all right, are there particular trends that we see? Are there any things that we can do as academic services to support specific grade levels, schools, sets of standards, potentially instructional practices? So that's where that conversation starts. And then the next phase of that process, which we also did in the fall, is we have a data summit. And coincidentally, our data summit is tomorrow for our winter, where we bring together all our instructional leaders. So that includes principals, instructional coaches, instructional facilitators, and we review our district level data and some of the trends and supports that we're going to be offering from our level, and then we allow them to collaborate with each other to develop data action plans that are specific to their school. And the good thing about this process is it's collaborative. So we have created cohorts of schools that consistently work together throughout the course of the year. So they have some partners as they build these plans out to be able to identify best practices and, to identify like, hey, is this a good idea? How is this working in your school? Give each other feedback. Lastly, we want to make sure that this is actually happening on the school level. So these instructional leaders have also worked with their teachers and their facilitators to develop what we call data action plans. And so data action plans are essentially, what are the specific interventions that we're going to roll out to support students? So that, once again, identifying tiered groups of students for support, as well as are there specific content areas that we need to give additional attention to? Maybe students didn't do particularly well in algebraic reasoning. What are some ways that we can adjust what we do in small group instruction? What can we do in different parts of our lesson, whether it be our digital tools for remediation that could support these particular areas? And that's all aligned to the driven by data model of Paul Bambrick Santoyo. And not only are our teachers doing this with our bigger long cycle assessments, but they're also doing that as we move through the process with what we call our medium and short cycle assessments, those unit level tests, those daily exit slips, and just student work, right? So this is a larger process that's related to all of our common planning time. And so with that being said, I would like to take some input from some of the instructional leaders and admin team that are on the call to maybe share some of their experiences with the common planning time cycle, particularly as it pertains to our big diagnostic assessments so far.
Ms. Brown, can you take share off if we're pausing here? And I think we're gonna, thanks. And just before anyone speaks, I think Josh is managing this. Can you let Mahler, Spivey, and Mark Lewis into the panelist side of this, please? Thank you.
I want to do it right now.
All right, just to clarify, so I'm just looking for, any administrators that would like to share their experiences with the common planning time and data cycle so far, and how has it impacted them supporting student learning?
So no one would like to speak and take the opportunity to platform or highlight their school?
I
Well,
will.
good afternoon. Good evening. This is Dr. Watson Bowie. And I would like to say that the Common Planning Time has been really an engaging process for all of us to work and support our teachers as far as looking at our instructional frameworks, looking at our instructional planning guides, having discussions around our standards and the rigor of our lessons. And then also looking at our curriculum programs to see how much alignment we are with actually executing the standards and keeping the pacing with that over this first half of the year. I think that we've actually grown as a building. We have a lot more to do. But with that, I've also seen a different dynamic with focus of instruction, focus of intervention, and we still have a long way to go. But I will say that consistently around the building, we can see that the rigor has changed throughout this quarter. Our teams come together weekly, and we have about 45 minutes. It's quick, it's high paced and energetic, and then throughout that, over time, we just keep working at it to kind of make sure that we're refining our skills and looking at kids' work and looking at their daily assignments to be able to support them and strengthen them in preparation for meeting the expectations of the benchmarks, which Mr. Dunn shared a lot, an overview across the district of what that looked like. So we at Colwyn and Alden are very much engaged in this process for reaching student achievement and growth for our students. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, Dr. Watson Bowie. I actually got a chance to spend some time this morning at Alden during one of their data meetings where they were sorting and unpacking student work to identify misconceptions and planning reteach. So it is very much real and authentic, and what Dr. Watson Bowie is describing is happening. Anybody else? I know that Principal Smith, I think you were about to share out.
Yeah, absolutely. At Evans, we have really embraced the process as well. And I would say, even though we see that there's some little evolution to that process as we grow in the process, we really have relied heavily on the IPGs and the IPP to kind of drive instruction. So particularly our focus for the year is math. So we have really focused a lot of priority time on our math, and being able to do that through that common planning meeting and really sit and look at the frameworks and the components of the math and take that time to focus and drive down on each individual component has made a huge difference. And I think the rigor and the outcomes of some of these long cycle tests that we're seeing. So we're seeing improvements. We do have a long way to go, like Dr. Watson Bowie said, but we are well engaged. Our students are engaged in the process, and we feel like we've made great success. It's a little bit like an onion. We peel back a layer, and then, there's so many more to go. And so we kind of feel like we're learning in that process with our staff, and fully embrace that.
Thank you for sharing, Principal Smith. And similarly, I got a chance to spend some time at Evans either earlier this week or last week, and met with their instructional facilitator and some teachers as they develop those action plans, looking at their mass screening and diagnostic and saying, okay, like, what are some of the interventions that we can put into place? How do we leverage our Dreambox adaptive platform to align some of those remediation lessons to areas of need for students? Like, what do we need to make changes in terms of some of our instructional practices to focus on some of those missing skills? So I just wanted to share some context because from the school level, so that you can hear both sides, not only from a district perspective, how we envision this rolling out, but also how it's landing on our folks in the building and how they're implementing. And everybody has their own spin, and it's very cool to see when they get a chance to be in the same room and bounce some of those ideas So with that being said, we'll take any questions on this portion. And if there aren't any questions, then we'll continue to move forward with the presentation.
Board members, any of you have questions?
I just wanted to comment that it's very helpful to hear on the one level, the administrative implementation, and then on the building level, what's happening and how the implementation between the team on the front line is happening. So it's exciting to hear that the rigor and is happening in the school district buildings where the students are. So I'm very excited about that.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and continue. Go ahead, Dr. Coe.
No, Ms. Brown, I just wanted to say something. I would be remiss if I did not share this information in regards to this item. This process has presented us with challenges as well as opportunities. And we are still helping people understand the why behind what we are doing. And so I don't want to leave this setting and not put that out there publicly, because we know that that is the case. I will also say that this is an area where we, if you'll recall, I'll use the word that we've paused to give people more time to understand what the why behind what we're doing. So I just wanted to make sure that we do acknowledge the work that the schools have done, but we have had some opportunities. I don't like to use the word challenges. I consider them as opportunities, ways in which we can improve and get better. So this is one of these areas in which we are moving forward, but we're also recognizing or have recognized some of the feedback that we've received from our teachers.
There's a hand raised. I just wanted to point out. Ms. Wright, Mrs. Wright.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to thank you for the previous education meeting where I was able to view it on YouTube. And tonight I'm able to tune in for the meeting this evening. And I appreciate, as was already mentioned, the rigor and the engagement, but I also appreciate you sharing it with us at the education meetings. They have been very helpful just to understand what's going on in the schools, how we're adhering to our strategic plan. And I just had one question. I'm sure it's something that you probably discuss often, but I just wanted to understand, as far as what we're talking about today and what we had talked about January the 12th. I had a question in reference to when you talked about analyzing the data and working on the data action plans. And you mentioned, Mr. Dunn, that the small group input, and you talked about digital tools for remediation. What specifically digital tools are being used for remediation in the K-3 setting?
Excellent question. So there's a variety of resources that we use, but primarily for mathematics, we utilize a platform called Dreambox. And what Dreambox is an adaptive software. So it exposes students to grade level content, and depending on how they respond to that grade level content, it adapts and supports them to work through mastering that content. And so so when we say even remediation, it could be remediation or extension, right? So if a kid is exposed to third grade content and they're in third grade, but they're really, really good at it, then it'll start showing them fourth grade content, right? Or vice versa if need be. Similarly, on the ELA side, we have a program called Lexia that works similarly and adapts to student need. And students over time transition through those programs as they rise in grade level. So specifically for K-2, those are the two programs, but as we move into like the middle school and high school, they have other programs that function similarly.
Okay, thank you for explaining that. I was especially interested in the one for math. So you mentioned it's Dreambox, and we're focusing on the alignment with what our goals are. I did note, thank you so much, Mr. Dunn. And I did want to take the time to thank Dr. B. Coates for the leadership with just following through. I really like the continuous follow through with the administrators and the administration, and of course with the support of the board and all of the hard work that I'm sure the teachers are doing in the classroom. And I just noticed that Miss Oates is listening in. So Miss Oates, so that I don't have to try to call and disturb you, I would still like to come in the spring just to kind of see the engagement of the students with the Lexia. It just sounds like it's something that is going to be quite interesting. So please keep me in mind for that when I call you later in the spring. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for that question.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Ms. Brown?
Now we'll move into our graduation requirements for 2023, and we'll bring Principal Lee, Dr. Lee, to the platform and podium, who will speak on behalf of Penwood High School.
Good evening. Thank you, Ms. Brown. My name is Judy Lee. I'm the principal at Penwood High School. I'm presenting high school graduation requirements from Act 158 this evening. Next slide, please. So while the next slide is coming up, I can briefly talk about Act 158. Our Governor Wolf signed Act 158 for our high school graduation requirement for class of 2023 and beyond. So what Act 158 presents to our students, class of 2023 and beyond, is that students have 4 additional alternative pathways to be able to graduate from the high school, even though they may not get scored proficient or advanced on each Keystone exam, Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology. There are 5 pathways in Act 158. The first pathway is Keystone Proficiency pathway, that students get scored proficient or advanced on each Keystone exam, Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology. Second pathway is Keystone Composite pathway. Student needs to earn a composite score of 4,452 on the Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology Keystone exams, while achieving at least a proficient score on at least one of the 3 exams and no less than a basic score on the remaining 2. Pathway 3 is Alternative Assessment pathway. Students successfully complete locally established grade-based requirements for academic content areas associated with each Keystone exam on which the student did not achieve proficiency, and one of the 6 options that Act 158 Pathway 3 provides. Pathway 4 is evidence-based pathway. If the student successfully completes locally established grade-based requirements for academic content areas associated with each Keystone exam on which the student did not achieve proficiency, and demonstration of 3 pieces of evidence consistent with the student's goals and career plans. Pathway 5 is CTE pathway. If the student successfully completes locally established grade-based requirements for academic content areas associated with each Keystone exam on which the student did not achieve proficiency, on the attainment of an industry-based competency certification related to the CTE concentrators program of study. So that's the brief summary of Act 158 for high school graduation requirement for class of 2023 and beyond. Do you have any questions?
I have one question, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Is this being communicated in some easy to understand way for our young people to understand?
Yes, so we had numerous student assemblies with our students. We also had on one-on-one individual meeting with our students, collaborating with our guidance counselors. So each guidance counselor has the spreadsheet of their caseload students in terms of what pathway might be best for each student on their caseload. We also communicated with our parents and community partners. It's posted on the high school page of the district website. Also is included in our course selection guide.
Awesome. And oh, I just lost it. Does Keystones, and I might be recalling incorrectly, but do our students still have the ability to graduate early if they score high enough on their Keystones, as I believe that was the original intention of the program years and years ago?
So that option is still available for our students.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms.
One of
Hall,
the-
I'm sorry, Dr.
no,
Bicos. Ms.
one
Hall,
of the- Oh, go ahead.
you first.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Ladies are first.
Oh, thank you, sir. You'll find that
He
information.
used that on the polar plunge too.
It's okay. We'll just take it as it is. You'll also find that information in a link on a slide deck that was entitled graduation requirements is a
Yeah.
link there, and it'll take you straight to the SAS portal for student alignment.
Yeah.
So it's connected to PDE and all that information is there. You could check on each pathway and it'll tell you what it needs, what the requirements are.
It was just hard to understand for, when I looked at it,
Right,
my
I
eyes
need the
glazed over.
dummies version,
Yeah.
pathways for
This
dummies. I needed that version.
This
Yeah.
is the cleaner version. So it is much
Oh, God.
easier. Practice makes perfect, right? So when we were first introduced to the new pathway, it was a lot, right? Now it's very much easier to navigate and read through as a regular non-educator. As an educator, it does make more connection and more sensibility now reading through it. But it takes time. You have to read through each pathway to get a better understanding. But some of the things are the same and other things have changed. More,
Yeah,
more opportunity.
I'm gonna check out the high school site, and I just want a 14-year-old to be able to understand it.
So, right, and so one of the things I think we should do is maybe consider doing some things a little different or doing a little bit more. And so in my mind, I look at us looking at the 11th grade students because they're going to have the greatest impact. And so looking at their actual transcript and based upon what classes students have taken, we need to be able to put students in buckets and then be able to help them to ensure that they are going to graduate last year. I will never forget the question that was asked of me in my interview. How do you make sure that you have a 9th grade student coming into our high school with a graduation plan? And so that's what this aligns with to me in my head. And I think we have to start by grade and do something different for each group because there's a different timeline associated with each group of those students. So I'll keep working with the high school on that. And I think we also have to engage our families a little bit more. I think it's fine to have the conversation with students, but I think families have to understand as well. Ms. Ivory, I'm sorry, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah.
No, that was my question. How are we engaging the parents, since most parents are non-educators? How are we engaging them so they understand this process? Are we incorporating this into thinking forward for next year into a back to school or an actual open, well, it doesn't even have to be in person. It could be a Zoom call just to explain to parents, giving them options to log in to get a little bit more clarity on an individual student's plan, regardless of what grade they are. Are we looking into doing anything that would help their child along with this process?
Yes, Miss Ivory. So we actually had the presentation for our parents during the back to school night, and Act 158 was included. We also scheduled our second quarter Zoom meeting for all parents. That's actually 6 o'clock tomorrow night, and Act 158 is included in that presentation. We also mailed basically the brief summary of Act 158 letters to all parents. Also, the state provided a simple flow chart for Act 158. So we also share that with our students and parents, but we plan to do that again. Another reminder is going to be helpful for all our school community members. So that's our plan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think I saw another hand.
Yes.
Your
Yeah, Ms. Commodore.
Commodore.
Good evening, everyone. How are you? I'm
Good
actually
evening.
I want to piggyback off of what Ms. Ivory, Dr. Lee, and Dr. Beatrice said. Just a suggestion, if it's not too late, could this possibly also go inside with the parent conferences that are coming up? I think just a friendly reminder to the parents and like, are you aware, excuse me, are you aware of the requirements? And if your child actually falls in that category, well, here's some different examples or different pathways we can help your child continue to be successful and productive towards their graduation requirements. That was it.
Thank you, Ms. Commodore.
Thank you.
Mr. Tong.
Thank you, everyone. I just have a question is, regarding to the simplicity of some of these things. So we have the Keystones, those are easy to understand for most teachers and families because it's a test that the state gives. But then when we get to alternative and evidence-based, do we have a list that parents can see what those could be so that they're simple to understand what are the options for students? And I know it's probably on the website, but making that easier to find, I think would be something that parents who, again, may not be able to attend everything, be something that they can find relatively simple. I just didn't know if that was available.
So thank you for sharing that, Mr. Tang. So I think I will work with our team that I think it would be best to create Act 158 tab on the high school page. So just parents have questions about Act 158, they just click and all informations are there. We will also make the Act 158 flow chart available for parents during the parent-teacher conference. And we will also mail that. Also, course selection guide includes the simple summary of Act 158 so that each pathway is clearly understood by all school community members.
Thank you, Dr. Lee.
You're welcome.
And Ms. Mashinda, in response to your question there, the discussion appears to be that there is going to be quite a bit of efforts to make sure that all parents have access to information so that they can know exactly where their child stands in the high school. So thank you all for that engaging conversation. Ms. Brown, back to you.
Thank you. That ends our presentation for this evening. If there are no other questions, Ms. Cook Henry, we are ready to be adjourned.
Are there any other questions? I don't see any hands raised. Once again, thank you for your participation.
Ms. Cook Henry, Ms. Mashinda has her hand raised.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Ms. Mashinda?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question for the parents who don't attend these meetings and who don't go on the website. How are they going to get the information about the new graduation requirements?
So we already mailed the parent letter about.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Lee. I just know a lot of parents don't come to these meetings and they don't go on the website. I just wanted to make sure, the parents have the information. So
Yeah, but
you're good.
yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Miss-
And we plan to do it again so that parents get another reminder.
Okay.
And Miss
Thank you.
Machinda, Miss Machinda, another thing.
Yes,
that we're-
Dr. B. Coates.
Another thing that we're going to do, in our strategic plan, we have an item that references transition to success. And one of those things that we will be doing is starting this communication at the 8th grade level, because it doesn't start in high school. You have to know about this as an 8th grade student, maybe even as a 7th grade student, as to what to expect. So that's where we're going to start. So Pam is on this Zoom, and we will definitely include this as a part of what we're doing for transition to success. Thank you for your question.
You're welcome. Did you see I
Different-
said good evening to you? You missed that in the chat because you're not on the chat, Mr. B. Coates, Dr. B. Coates.
No, ma'am, I didn't see that. Good evening.
It's okay. I forgive you. I charge it to your heart.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Again, thank you for your participation this evening. This
Ms.
meeting has
Cook-Henry?
been, yes.
I'm sorry, one more question. How does this dovetail with the NCAA requirements and all that stuff for our student athletes? And if that's like too long of a question, we can answer it later, but I'm always curious about the clearinghouse for NCAA and how that all dovetails together, this testing, et cetera.
Mr. Corkery is on the line. I'm going to ask him to provide an answer for us, and we'll put that in the weekly update to the board.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you,
Mr.
Dr.
Denenza, I'm sorry, Ms. Cook-Henry, I just want to bring to your attention, a parent put in the chat. I don't know if you saw that or not, but okay, just wanted to make sure. Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Henry, I'm done.
Okay.
Dr. Bika, did you want me to say anything about the NCAA clearinghouse now or just wait for the weekly update?
I mean, if you know it, that's fine. I just didn't know if that was something that you knew in reference to Act 158.
I don't think it has much to do with Act 158. The NCAA clearinghouse is more about your core courses and your GPA. So right now, I think it's the 16 to 18 core credits that they have to have, and it's a sliding scale. The minimum GPA is a 2.0, but the sliding scale is it goes in correlation with the SAT or ACT scores. The higher the SAT score, the 2.0 it makes them eligible. But if you get up to a 2.3 or higher, as your GPA goes higher, the score requirement on SAT, ACT goes down. So that's the clearinghouse issue on that piece.
Got it. Thank you so
And
much.
obviously you have to pass all your courses and graduate too. So
Right.
that's how it ties into Act 158. So
Could you do all that and graduate early with your Keystone test scores? Or would
I
that
don't
make
see
it-
why not. Yeah, I mean, as long as you have all the core courses with the minimum requirement GPA and SAT, ACT score.
Great, thank you so much.
This meeting has been adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Be safe.